A lot of what used to be differentiators, most companies are doing these things, and the competitive advantages that you thought you once had, you don't really have anymore because everyone else is doing it.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we take a look at what is changing in the industry, and we take you to the front lines to those that are driving those changes. As always, I'm Donnie, Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest and Triangle Lawn. And with me, probably a little too much. I've been spending a lot of time with this guy, and I can't say that I've enjoyed it all the way. But with me is my co-host, co-partner. I don't know what I would call that. Yeah. Dan, introduce yourself, our sponsors, and our special guest. I think.
Well, I can honestly say that I've enjoyed all of our time together. So, hi everyone. It's Dan Gordon, PCO Bookkeepers, PCO M&A specialist. Today's episode, as the others, are sponsored by Coalmarch by WorkWave. If you want to learn more about digital marketing, go to coalmarch.com. And PestSure for those who want insurance for the pest control industry. And today we are going to continue our discussion that we had last week with Rachel Betterbid of VP of Digital Marketing by Coalmarch. And so we had a pretty good discussion, and we thought we only got through half of what we wanted to, so we figured we would do another one and get the whole thing down, because marketing is extremely important, and we know that going into 2024 that everybody's got to put their plan together. And
I was going to say, to be fair, I think on the last episode we kind of like preached everyone to hell, but didn't bring them back, right? We kind of like told them all the stuff that was going wrong and bad, not wrong and bad, but just that all the challenges, but we didn't actually get around to, now here's what you do. But before we get to that, and before we get Rachel going here.
What did I forget?
There's going to be a photo that's going to go up for this episode. Last week, Dan and I were in a particular city at a particular restaurant, and we were asked, what was the special occasion? To which I said it was Dan's birthday, and we stuck with it the entire night.
I didn't stick with it, and I didn't know that it was going to happen. However, there were 12 of us or 13 of us, and they brought out a cake with candles.
That was fantastic.
Happy birthday! And my birthday's in November, so
it's fantastic.
That's what.
Yeah, we went with it. So there you go. So all right. That's exactly. You got free cake. It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
I didn't get any presents, so
yes.
Okay.
All right, RB. Well, hey, welcome back. Yet another record. I think this is number 4 with RB, which is
you did that on purpose. Yep.
Yeah. And so we had these set up, and so great to have you back. So what I was thinking is, we talked last time about kind of how demand is down and what's been going on, as far as like inflation, and we kind of got into a lot of numbers. Do you just want to, I think it'd be good just to do a real quick recap of our last show, and then let's start digging into what we can do to, to really to set up for next year, because obviously that's what most people are thinking about right now.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. To kind of recap our conversation from our last podcast, which hopefully you're listening to back, but pretty much what we went through is the data that we have access to both within WorkWave, industry data that is just objectively showing that industry growth for the pest control and lawn care industry has slowed down in 2023, but competition remains the same. So in a nutshell, the metaphorical size of the pie has stayed the same, but everybody's slice is getting smaller and smaller. There's a lot of challenges that are coming from that in the form of, ad costs are rising, less demand. It's harder and harder for pests and lawn companies to meet their revenue goals. Cost per leads are high, having to essentially spend more to get less. And what to do with that. I think that's the part we haven't gotten to yet is, okay, we know everything is, not looking good, but what do we actually do about it? How do we pivot our marketing strategy, maybe even part of it, our business strategy, where we focus our efforts? So I think that's kind of where we're at now to talk about.
Yeah. So let's get into it. So obviously there's change that's driving all of this, right? The game just changed. The game constantly changes. And stuff that, we knew 3 years ago that was working. It's not working now. I thought it would be good. Maybe we talk through kind of the really big, I mean, things are always changing. I feel like the algorithm changes every, 90 days or whatever. Can you just walk us through real quick? Like, what are the biggest changes to, basically digital that you've seen in the last year or two? And then what impact that might have? And then obviously what we would do. I mean, of course, we want to get to what we're going to do, but can you just walk through some of the newer changes?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest changes is not necessarily the way that Google's algorithm changes, because even though there are a lot of changes, and as digital marketers, we have to keep up with those changes, they generally stay the same. For the most part, ranking factors are pretty much the same now as they were 10 years ago. I think it's more consumer behavior and how people are finding what they need that's changing, and how you as a business need to keep up with that, as well as just some other things as far as like a big thing that we've been kind of talking about as digital marketers are just data and privacy. This is a big topic of conversation just in the entire world right now, as far as, more and more people are using VPNs and they're hiding their IP addresses, and there's emerging privacy laws in different states to really hide users' information so that other people can't sell it to people like us marketers, right? Phasing out third-party cookies, a lot of technical elements. And so to the average pest control owner, it's like, okay, what the heck does that mean for me? But really, as digital marketers, what we're seeing is that we're not getting as much data on users as we're used to. And so attribution is getting trickier and trickier, and data as a whole that, we pretty much use to make so many decisions is becoming less and less reliable. And so that's something I like to mention, just to keep in mind that I know, a lot of business owners are running campaigns, spending money in all different kinds of, platforms and channels, and looking at things often in a vacuum. What does my Google Ads cost per lead look like? What does my SEO cost per lead look like, right? And using that data to make business decisions on what they should do advertising wise. And so really what I want everyone to take away with this is that data is getting trickier and trickier. And so attribution is getting harder and harder. So, we need to evolve with that, meaning we need to not look at things in such a vacuum, because we can't really trust it. And also the way that users are finding solutions to their problems are not very linear, right? Like someone may see a streaming ad of your business and not take any action, and then see a display ad, again, not take any action, and then, search your brand name and think about taking action, and then 2 days later, search for pest control and then come through a PPC ad, right? Like, how do you attribute that lead? And if it becomes a sale, how do you attribute that to a specific source? And you can't really, right? So that's kind of the concept of omnichannel marketing, and just users are not limited to one channel to buying things or to finding solutions. And so with that, needing to focus less on that granular data and more on the bigger picture data and what it's telling you over a period of time as far as what is working and what's not, and just pivoting.
So is that anything new? Like years ago, people were saying, well, geez, how did you see me? How'd you find me? They'd call in on the pay-per-click, right? They'd Google your name. They'd hit the sponsored ad, which unfortunately cost you a bunch of money. How'd you hear about us? Oh, I saw your truck drive by. Is it gotten any worse, or is it the same? And the whole VPN thing, average consumers are doing this to hide their identities. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, no, it's definitely gotten worse, especially on the VPN side. So essentially people are using private networks to browse the internet, meaning there's certain information that you can't tie to a session or a user going to your website, like their location, where they're converting from, where they came from, right? So that's kind of information that I think a lot of marketers and business owners rely on, as far as where are my leads coming from a market standpoint? Where am I down in leads from a market standpoint, right? And if you can't trust that location data, that's just kind of a blind spot now from a marketing perspective. And it's not an all or nothing thing. It's getting worse. We're seeing more and more data in Google Analytics that does not have demographic data associated with it, that doesn't have source medium data associated with it, meaning we can't really tell where they came from or what they did on the website, but we know that they, picked up the phone and called. And so, yes, it's definitely getting worse.
You said very something though that I want to bring back, which was, it's becoming more and more omni-channel now, whereas before we could use, the sniper method with digital. it really is broadening out, and you got to whip out your shotgun. You know what I mean? Like, you just cannot. I don't know if Dan probably gets gun metaphors here. I should probably stop using them. But anyway, but I'm making the point that, like, I've seen this several times, like with people who do kind of multi-channel marketing, they do get better results online, because the fact is that not all attribution is, even if it comes through that channel, that's not the intent, right? I mean, that's not where they really found out about you. And I'm going to have a little fun with you, Dan. Do you know who John Wanamaker was? You remember who he was?
No.
John Wanamaker. Anyone? No.
Somebody with a gun.
He was like one of the most famous marketers ever. Like, legitimately, like, he came up with, like, get people to brush their teeth. I mean, this is. But he had a quote that I will never forget, and I memorized it. I don't know why it stuck with me, but the quote was, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half."
You don't know which half.
So bringing it back to you, Rachel, I think the main thing here is that I really like that you said that, is that, marketing now, it's getting more difficult to get the data. You can't be a sniper any longer, and you really got to start thinking about omnichannel, and start thinking about how you're going to get multiple ways of getting to your customer, because it's not as easy. And so I want to bring that into now. So now what? Right? Like, now, like, how do I, if that's the case, and it's getting more expensive, everyone is jumping on, what do I do? What do I do as a business owner? Like, how do I set up so that I can make sure that the money that I am spending, I know I can't get as detailed as I was before, but what can I do? So let's spend some time on that.
Yeah. There's a few other things as far as how the landscape has changed the most that I want to focus on, because I think it will inform kind of what do we do. And so 2 things I want to mention: ease and convenience is everything in this day and age. People are impatient. Consumers want fast information. They want to book things without talking to people. They don't want to spend a ton of time researching, right? They want to make fast decisions. And so what we're seeing is growing use of texting, online booking, web chats, right? A lot of companies are already utilizing these tools on their website or in different forms. Another interesting thing that I think is important to mention is on-demand home service apps like TaskRabbit are growing. It's an industry that is essentially booming. And so that's something that I think a lot of pest and lawn companies are probably not taking the most advantage of, but it's something to keep in mind to just further, confirm that people want ease and they want convenience. So how can you as a company make it as easy as possible for someone to find your company?
Hang on, stop. TaskRabbit, what are you talking about? Hang on, back that up. I'm not familiar with this. And if you're telling me that it's booming, obviously I'm not on the end here. So what?
Yeah. So TaskRabbit, this is kind of an industry in itself as far as on-demand home service apps. Think of things like Angie, Thumbtack, Home Advisor. TaskRabbit is one that has come onto the market the last couple of years, and it's definitely not meant to be used necessarily by businesses. It's more individual people, that contractors that go on there offer services for an hourly rate, but it's just the general consensus that people are looking for ease and convenience, whether it's through a business or it's working with, a third-party contractor. If you can go and open an app and find someone, get a price and book it right on the spot, more and more people are leaning towards that option. So how can you as a business adapt and make it as easy as possible? Even if you're not going to advertise on TaskRabbit because it doesn't make sense for you, this industry in general is booming because users and consumers in general, they want ease and they want convenience and they want to do things fast. So if you are not in on that notion and your business isn't set up to provide that kind of fast information and pricing and service, then you're already kind of lagging behind. And so again, what does that look like for business owners? Online booking options, texting, web chats, all the different mechanisms in which you can get people fast information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I was having some technical difficulty. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you back. So Dan is back with us.
Did I blow up the podcast before? Because my gosh,
you left a cliffhanger where you're going to have this just amazing thought, and then your mic died. So
I don't remember it. It blew my brains out. But I think I just got off the phone with somebody who told me that that digital doesn't work anymore because they're pushing it all to Google local services. They're getting, and he can only close at 15% of those Google local services. Now, on the surface, that seems like okay, but at the end of the day, that sounds like a sales problem, not a marketing problem, right? Tell me about some of the things that in digital that are working, maybe the Google local services, which for the most part, we seem to think that works pretty well.
Yeah. And I think all of the things that have historically worked for most companies in this industry are continuing to work, right? SEO, local, as far as Google Maps, PPC, PPC is getting harder and harder in the sense that it's getting more expensive, but collectively, across 150 clients, it's still one of the biggest ways that our customers generate more customers and more business. So I think a lot of those things are staying the same. But again, where we need to adapt is, in general, something that we're seeing that is getting bigger and bigger, that is talked a lot about in the industry, is what we call like zero-click searches, which is essentially people are going to Google and they're finding what they need on Google and they're not even making it to your website. So it's not to say that your website isn't important. It's just meant to say that you need to do whatever you can to have as much visibility on Google as possible, whether that is through PPC ads, whether that's through local services, but especially the map section, which unfortunately is very proximity based. So as a, service area based company, that doesn't tend to bode well for our customers. But zero-click searches are on the rise. People aren't even making it to your website. So how can you get as much visibility on Google as possible, not just when it comes to SEO, but in all the different sections of what the landscape of Google looks like? And so a big thing that we've talked a lot about with our clients, and I know we've obviously talked with you, Donnie, for Triangle, is kind of what we call adopting a digital franchise model, where you have a lot of locations throughout your service area, not necessarily locations that you are operationally working out of, but that are online locations that are in close proximity to the different areas, zip codes that have a lot of opportunity to really maximize that visibility that you have in, a Google search, because it's...
Hang on. Let me pause you there, though. Just a disclaimer for our listeners. You would probably it's probably easier to get a top secret clearance than it is to get one of these locations approved. I mean, it is unreal. If you've not done this recently, we're talking like videos. I mean, like the whole bit. Like it's insane what you have to do to validate these locations. It's nowhere near as easy as it used to be, where you just get a postcard and you validate that postcard.
Continuous videos, right? You can't just turn it off and go someplace to your call center and go back, right?
Right.
Yep.
It needs to be a legitimate.
Anyway, just a little side note.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, if you follow the rules, it doesn't have to be hard, but I think a lot of people want to cut corners and they want to get virtual addresses or addresses that are just made up and aren't really real. And yes, Google is doing its best to kind of weed out those people that are trying to game the system. In general, if you have a legitimate address, theoretically, it shouldn't be that hard to get it approved, but when you're not following the rules, then yes, it definitely can be. But there's instances for sure where people are still having issues. But in general, that's something that we still continue to push, especially for people who have large service areas. If you're servicing across 3 different states and you have one location that is hours away from all of the different areas that you service, you're essentially going to have no visibility from a local standpoint. So that is definitely not working in your favor. So in general, if you're in very competitive markets, if you have a very large service area, having a lot of locations and having that kind of, again, digital franchise model and looking at that more as a marketing expense than like an operating expense, especially if you're not operating out of that branch or that location, those one by one are not going to give you a ton of volume, but it's all, a sustainable, stackable way to increase your visibility in all of your markets and get leads at somewhat of a cost-effective rate, especially if you can get rent that isn't insanely expensive.
Yeah. So you were talking about the zero clicks, bypassing your website. So it seems to me that the most important thing there are reviews. Now we have clients who pay their technicians for reviews. Does that become more and more important? And how much would you pay your technician? Because that becomes part of the cost of a lead, but you can't really attribute it to a specific lead. Are you talking to people about doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm more in favor of building a review generation system and using tools and technology to just do that for you versus asking your technicians. Because I mean, as a customer of Triangle Pest Control, I very rarely come face to face with my technician. And so, but do I get a text message after every service to ask me to leave a review? Yeah. So I'm more on the side of leaning on technology to automate all of that and not really leaning on your technicians and people to necessarily drive that. So I think having a good system for continuous review generation has been extremely important, and it's not necessarily more important, but there's no end point there. You don't just stop on review generation. You need to keep going, and that needs to be a continuous part of your overall marketing strategy is really just leveraging technology to do that. And that's a lot of what I kind of want to talk about as far as, how marketing strategies in general need to change, in the short term and in the long term. It's really, how can you use technology and build a tech stack in your business that reduces people costs, and you can use that money to reinvest into other areas like technology and advertising as that continues to get more expensive. And I think that's actually a great example of where can you rely less on people and leverage technology to automate things that are going to be valuable to your business.
I mean, as a side note, and I know most of our listeners know this, but just know that I think, at least to my knowledge, every major CRM in our business has this automated in some way that you can, even, I mean, I know WorkWave has an automation for this. I know Routes has it, and I don't want to name drop all of them, but I'm pretty sure, and I think most of our listeners already have this working, right? But you're absolutely right. You got to make it into a system, make it automatic. But I also see value in the technician if they do get to meet with the person. I mean, one of the things that we like to tell them is, tell the customer, look, we want to provide 5-star service. Like, we set that expectation up front so that we can hopefully get the review. This is obviously not about reviews, but just little things that you can do to try to make sure that if you do get a review and you get something from a customer, there is a personal touch and they understand what you're trying to do. So there's
Donnie,
okay,
do you incentivize your technicians to get reviews or no?
We have standards. I'll just say that we have standards, and Rachel's smiling because she knows what I'm saying. I have standards, and my expectation is that you'll meet the standard. So, and if you don't, then we'll help. So, but I mean, most people, it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, we have it pretty well integrated. You almost have to not want to do it in order to not do it. But so let's back up. So things that I can do. Number one is I can realize, like, okay, I'm going to have to broaden my marketing through multi-channel marketing. I may have to get a couple of different locations. I'm going to have to make sure that, I am using texting to some degree. I don't know how many folks are using marketing texting campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Those can be a little dicey, so just be careful as you do those. Check the laws in your state. There's email marketing. What else is there to do now that we have kind of this new landscape?
Yeah. And I'm not even thinking of it in the sense of channels as far as email versus PPC, but more just one, I think quick wins are, and I think we touched on this last episode as far as maximizing those low cost, high margin sales opportunities. So things like implementing a system for current customer upsells and win back strategies and maximizing customer referrals, right? Like, those are very low cost ways to generate new sales in the form of revenue. And so there's a lot of different channels that you can leverage to be able to do that, whether it is texting, email marketing, more in-person things like, leave behinds or direct mail pieces or customer letters that go to their mailbox. But I think, from my experience, not a lot of business owners have systems in place to automatically do these things, to automatically, send emails and texts for current customer upsells, or to, send a campaign once a year or twice a year to customers that have recently canceled in the last 6 to 12 months, or, to on an ongoing basis, remind people that there's great customer referral deals, or even run seasonal deals with that during, the busy season when someone's most likely to need pest control. Maybe increase your referral deal during that time and see if, you can get extra sales from that. Like, I feel like that's the easiest, like, low hanging fruit that we all know is important, but that, in my experience, a lot of companies don't have, again, systems and technology in place to actually do this in a smart, ongoing way. Maybe just one campaign here and there when they think of it, but they don't have that system built out. So I would say that is a big one. Never stop focusing on review generation. That continues to be extremely important. You guys talked before about price increases for existing customers. I know customers don't want, or business owners don't want to do that all the time, but it very much is a quick way to get more revenue from your existing customers. One thing that I'm curious to hear your perspective on, Donnie, is how do you feel about discounts for new customers? Let's say you're raising the rates for existing customers, but just to get a new customer in the door, however much you're willing to pay for a lead. Let's say you're willing to pay $150 for a legitimate lead, and on average, you tend to generate them at, $80 a single lead, but volume is your issue, or maybe closing is your issue. Are you willing to negotiate price with customers in order to make that deal? Is that something that your CSRs are given the flexibility to do if it means making a sale?
Okay. So this is the part where people are going to disagree with me because I've been on both sides of the fence on this one. So a couple things. Number one, yes and no. Okay. And it depends. So there you go. So the first thing is, when we did the doors this year, yes, we did have a deal on the door. It was on the door only, and it was discounted. And our sales teams used that, and it kind of worked. I have gone all over the map on this, and I'm going to tell you where I landed. I'm not telling you I'm right, wrong, or different. I'm just going to tell you my journey. So I used to think that more volume was fantastic. And so we would do discounted initials. In fact, one year I went with no contracts and like basically half initial price. And here's what I found. Number one is that we did a lot of volume. Like, it absolutely had the effect that I wanted, but we made less money. And what I mean by that is that we had higher cancels, especially the year that I did no contracts, which was just a huge fail for us. Because, people essentially called in, they got the deal for the recurring service, they had no commitment, and as soon as the problem was solved, they were canceling. So I created that. The other thing I will say is that we incentivize for full price sales now. Are there some wiggle room? Yeah, but to me, it's like, it'll go down to a certain point. Like for us, we don't like selling initials less than 149. That I'm just talking strictly pest control here. Obviously, depending on where you're at in the United States, that could be totally different. But so we incentivize our people to make sure that we get full price sales. And so I'm kind of at the mindset now, and this has a lot to do with the fact of where we're at as a business. In my early days, I would do anything to get you to say yes. I mean, we needed the money. But now it's like, I would much rather have a smaller, more profitable company than a larger, less profitable company that's basically making the same amount of dollar amounts. And so yes and no. I don't think it's a huge driver. I think what is the main driver in terms of marketing and closing sales, especially in pest control, I'm not talking lawn care right now. Lawn care is definitely more price sensitive, but pest control, it's all about professionalism and speed. And it is absolutely like, can you respond quickly and well? And that's the driver behind what's going to close the sale. Not on lawn care. Lawn care, it's a little bit longer sell, and they are more price sensitive, but you still don't need to give away
the other thing with discounting is that it's not like, if I give away $1 and, we've gone through how much of the dollar goes to marketing, how much goes to gross margin, how much, so if I'm putting 20% on the bottom line, if I give away $1, I'm not giving away 20 cents. I'm giving away that full dollar. It hits the bottom line. So if you've got a $500, 125, times 4, if you've got a $500 quarterly and you're going to give away $50 and you're at a 20% margin, you've just given away half of your profit. So discounting is very, very expensive. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that, I agree with you, Donnie, on the discounting is, okay, you're going to give somebody a brand new customer a discount, but their neighbor who's been with you for 5 years doesn't get it. Now what happens?
Mm-hmm. So. I ask because from my experience, the things that you just talked about that are the main differentiators, let's say same day service, right? Fast service, professionalism, texting, automatic updates, right? Like just ease and convenience, all of those things. What happens when every pest control company is doing that and every company has good reviews and it does come down to price? And I mean, again, I say that from my own personal experience of just buying a house, and where it's like, yeah, you have two great companies that are offering literally the exact same thing and the same outcome, which is, let's say, no bugs, right? You both can promise that. If it's going to come down to $5 less a month, I'm probably going to go with what's $5 less a month, right? So I'm not even crazy, price reductions or whatever. It's just, if you're offering me the same thing, and I believe the quality is going to be the same from all of the different factors I can look at, whether that's your reviews, how many times a year you come to my home, right? Like, I'm probably going to go with the less one. Now, if there's big discrepancies, and a slightly more expensive company can come out tomorrow and I can get it cheaper, but they can't come out for a week. Sure. But like, let's say everything else is an even playing field, which is what it kind of seems like where the industry is heading, is a lot of what used to be differentiators. Most companies are doing these things, and the competitive advantages that you thought you once had, you don't really have anymore because everyone else is doing it. And that's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, you're commoditizing it, and that's not what it is. And so you've got a good salesperson. So the first thing that you have to do is make that salesperson likable, right? Mm-hmm. Once they get the service, they're either going to stay with you or they're not. But the salesperson has to be likable and has to be able to make that sale and point out that differentiation. But the worst thing that can happen, what you're saying is it's kind of that if it's truly happening, which I don't believe it is, that means you've got a commodity, and you don't need any salesperson. You don't need anything. It's just, bid on what, it's like going after a public bid, lowest price. That's it.
Well, I'm going to say right now, we're not ever going to be commoditized because we do service.
No. Mm-hmm. I agree.
You're dealing with people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, it's just, it's always going to be.
But in communicating, Rachel, you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. We have the best service. We have clean, vehicles. We are going to show up on time, but the question is, can you execute it? And a lot of companies don't execute on what they say they're going to do.
For sure.
Yeah.
I do think that, that kind of leads into, as far as long-term, what do business owners need to do and it's really developing and continuing to pivot those competitive advantages and really crafting that intentional image and brand. What do you want your company to be known for? A lot of times when we're working with new customers and we ask what are their competitive advantages, it's exactly what you just said, Dan. It's great service, best service, same day service. And it's like, again, we work with hundreds of companies that are saying the same thing. So it cannot be, if everyone does the same thing, it's not unique. And so I think, that is really important. And the way that I like to think of that is something that we kind of have a framework that we use from a leadership management, people management thing. It's perspective. It's called PI, and it's essentially performance, image, and exposure. And it's very much centered around, you want to focus on performance and results first. So for pest control companies, that would be, can you actually deliver, the service, and can you deliver it well? And then from there, once you feel confident in, okay, we can generate results as a company, we perform well, let's work on really crafting our image. And then once you really have an image that you feel proud of and that you feel confident in, then focus on exposure, getting yourself out there. But oftentimes this is kind of done out of order, right? Like, companies don't have their ish together. They don't really have an image, and then they, put a ton into marketing and they, expose themselves, so to speak. But they don't really have a brand, and they don't really have a good system in place to deliver on those results. And so oftentimes you have to go back to the drawing board, and, that's when you have to focus on operationally. What are the things that we need to do? And then who are we? Who is my company? What do I want us to be known for? What do I want our brand to be? And I think, again, in my experience, a lot of lawn and pest control companies don't really have brand images and stories, and they don't know what those competitive advantages are, or who, what they want that story to be about their brand. And so it makes it harder to even try and tap into more of those branding, marketing opportunities when you don't have a dedicated brand story, message, and tone, and all of those things.
And the only thing I would add to that is that this is very difficult to do because, when you get into talking about brand and what do you want people to remember about your company, everything has to say it. And that's more difficult than you might think. Everything has to say it. Your service tickets need to say it. Your trucks need to say it. Your website needs to say it. All your mail pieces. It's like you would be shocked. At least I was shocked at how many different signals and how many different messages were going out from our company, and how difficult it is to have all those lined up. And this is kind of getting back into marketing basics, which it's like most things, right? If the fundamentals were easy, everyone would do it, right? Everyone would be in shape and have a ton in their savings account. But the reality of it is that this is something this is like marketing 101, but it absolutely is. It matters more now. You cannot get away with just, throwing on a pay-per-click campaign and riding that out. It just does not work that way anymore. Anything else you can think of that we need to add as far as like long-term strategy on, as far as like how do you prep? I mean, I think the take-home message I'm getting from you, at least for the long term, is like go back to the basics and do marketing the right way, the fundamentals of marketing, which is, your messaging, your branding, and then making sure it's all lined up and be across multiple channels. And I think that's what I heard. But anything else that you can think of to add to that?
I mean, I feel like we didn't even get into it, but the evaluating your business operations and finding the efficiencies. This is something we're going through as, a digital marketing business, as far as labor is getting and talent is getting more and more expensive, and you need to grow. You need to hit those revenue goals, but you also need to hit your profit goals. But how do you do that? If you have to pay people more, you need more as you get bigger. And so really building that tech stack in your business that, could reduce people costs and find ways to, find where you're spending money in your business, not just in marketing. Where are those efficiencies? How can you use technology to automate things? How can you use technology to do things faster? And then taking that money to reinvest in your company, in the marketing and in the growth of your company. And that's that could be a whole other episode in itself, right? Because it's what does that actually look like for a home service business? But I think that a lot of times we see our customers say, okay, you're telling me I need to spend more in advertising or I need to spend more in branding. But at the end of the day, they're looking at their P&L and it's like the money's got to come from somewhere, right? If you don't want to lower your goals, then it's got to come from somewhere. Where does it come? And that's kind of long-term how I think pest control and lawn care business owners need to think is, where is that money going to come from long-term? And it's got to come from technology.
Well, I think it's got to come from efficiency. Route efficiency is where you can squeeze everything out. Could you take down your marketing costs? Yeah, but if you want less leads, right? But that, that's not a strategy. Trying to save paper clips in the office, that's not going to do it. So it's all about efficiency and pricing on the top line, right? So those are the two things. Once you can get that, then you can spend more on marketing. But we've seen this before, right? This is the Yellow Pages, a high-tech version of the Yellow Pages all over again. The question is, the Yellow Pages were old technology and they got wiped out. Google and digital is not old technology. What happens to it? Where does it, where does it end?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the only thing and we got to finish out here, and Rachel, I appreciate you being on the podcast. I think, at least for me, I got a lot of good nuggets out of it. Just say this because we've not said it.
Little depressing though, but keep going.
I would say it's depressing, but let's also, the one thing I would add to this entire conversation, and I'm going to wrap it up with this, which is, if you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. Don't ever lose sight of the fact you need to be a good operator. If you suck as an operator, you can put all kinds of marketing on your company and it's not going to work. And so step one is client fulfillment, right? Step one is delivering the promise. Step one is making sure that when someone calls you, that you can actually execute and you can do it well. And so don't lose sight of that. I would say that even if your brain is swimming from all of this, you can focus on being a super good operator. Marketing is like gasoline. If you're a crappy operator, marketing is nothing, right? It's an inert ingredient, right? It's not going to do anything. I mean, I shouldn't say it do anything, but it's not going to move the needle. So just don't lose sight of that. I think that's an important point. So, all righty, Rachel, fantastic episode. Thank you for coming back on board. It's been great to have you here. We'll probably bring you back next year as we start getting prepped for the season next year. Lots of good information for our listeners to take back. As always, we appreciate and love reviews that are positive and are 5-star. We strive for 5-star service. If you have complaints, if there's things that you don't like, as always, we ask that you route that to Dan. And with that, we're signing off. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Sure.
All right.
See ya.
Now.